Hi there, my name's Vince from Mr. Telephone, and in this video today I'm going to talk about networking. Now it might be quite a long video because I'm going to show you the network in my house and also another house as well, so you get an idea of the different ways to do it. Now a lot of people get really scared when they start thinking about networking their house because they see things like this 24 port patch panels or a 48 port patch panels in maybe, for example, their comms room at their work, and they think, oh, I can never do that because there's so many cables going everywhere. But really, it is very simple. And when you've networked up your house, the best thing about it is the flexibility. It just works and you can do exactly what you want. So if, for example, you want to put a phone line in your daughter's bedroom or your father-in-law's bedroom or whatever, you can do that. If you've got two lines coming into the house, you haven't got to have separate extensions for each line. You can decide that you want line A to be in this room, you want line B to be in that room. If you want to network up your PlayStation, your son gets an Xbox One, and the Wi-Fi is not working too great, you don't have to put much thought into it, because if you've put sockets in all the rooms that you want to network up, it's just a case of getting a patch cable from that socket into the Xbox One, and you know it just works. The cables don't wear out over time, they just work. So Wi-Fi is getting better and better, and loads of us have things networked up via Wi-Fi. So for example, if you've got an iPad or an iPod, then that is still going to be, you're still going to be using Wi-Fi because you haven't got an option to plug in a Cat5e or a Cat6 cable into them. But if you've got your smart TV, your desktop, your games console, all these things can be networked. And although Wi-Fi is getting better and better, and although power line adapters are getting better and better, these are the power line adapters that you can also use to network, a wired connection is still, at the time of making this video, the best way to do things. So maybe in the future, other technologies will catch up. Maybe, I don't see how they can overtake it, but they might get as good at it. At this moment in time, the wired connection just works, and although it is a lot of hassle to install to begin with, once it's done, you haven't got to worry about it then. It's done and you can just forget about it, and you know it's just going to work. So basically, what is networking? It's just connecting pieces of equipment together. So imagine now this is your router. You've got your telephone socket coming into the house, you've got your phone plugged into the telephone socket, and you've also got your router plugged into your telephone socket. If you have a look at the back of your router, you will have spare ports. Now, most routers on the market these days, they still only have 4 ports. You can get some that have more ports, but most of the ones you get from your service provider at the time of this video will just have the 4 ports. But that's not a problem. If you want to make more ports, you can cheaply get a network switch. They're under £30 in the UK, and then that will free up, that will give you more ports. So what you would do is you can have your Xbox One here, your desktop PC there, your smart TV there, then you will have an Ethernet cable going from there into your network switch, which I will show you in my setup here. I've got a network switch, and then depending on the size of your switch, the one I've got, that then allows me to plug in another 4 pieces of equipment. But you can get bigger switches, so you don't have to worry about running out of ports. But the things people get confused with is they see stuff like this maybe in their workplace and they think there's no way I can wire up one of these. Oh, there's cables everywhere, haven't got a clue what's going on. Or they see things like, do I need a double socket? Do I need a single socket? And they all get confused. But essentially, all a network is plugging in a cable into here, and then the other side, plugging it into your desktop or your Xbox One using the network port. That's the RJ45 port. That's the ones that look like that. So they've got 8 pins on them. Yeah. So whenever you see one of these on your laptop, that's just where you would be plugging your Ethernet cable into. Yeah. So essentially, that's all it is. You could have another cable going off to your Xbox One, another cable going to your smart TV. So that's all it is if you were to plug these in directly. The only problem with doing it like this is normally these cables are patch cables, so they're very soft, and if they fail over time, then you're going to have to replace that whole lead. So it's not the best way to do it. If you're doing this in an office or even in your house, you don't want to have to be thinking that these might, that these might kink and fail, and then you have to replace the whole lead. So the best way of doing it is to run solid core cable, that stiff cable that you buy on a box. Normally you get 305 meters off it. Again, people like myself sell it in 50 meters or 20 meters or 100 meters, whatever you need. And the best way to do it is to terminate it onto wall sockets. Now, this is solid core, meaning that the actual strands of wire themselves are one single piece of copper, so it's quite stiff, rather than patch cable, which normally has 7 strands of copper per wire. So that's why it's so flexible, because it's stranded, it's nice and flexible. So the best way to do it is to wire up, if you were just to do point to point. So you would have, pretend this cable is 50 meters long or 20 meters long. Basically it can be run up to 100 meters. So you would have this by your PC or your Xbox One, and then you would have this one by your router, and then all you do is you get your short patch lead and you plug one bit in there, the other side in here, and then it's using all the fixed wire through the walls, above the ceilings, under the floorboards to get to the other side. And then the other side you would use another patch lead to get from your wall socket to your Xbox One, your PlayStation, your smart TV, whatever you're connecting up. And that way then, the bit that's most likely to fail is this short patch lead, because this is the bit that's going to get knocked and moved around the place. And to replace them is really easy. You unplug them, spend a couple of quid getting another one, plug it in, and that's it, job done. And as well, by running cables everywhere in the house, rather than running just long patch leads, you then have more options when it comes to like pushing telephone lines down it and stuff. So a lot of people get confused. They think that if I put a double socket on, so for example, if I put a single socket by my router and then a double socket on this side, that I can have 2 outlets here. You can't. All a double socket is 2 modules next to each other in the one faceplate. Each module will still need its own cable back to the router. So from the router, you have to have each cable go into one socket, another cable to another socket, another cable to another socket, another cable to another socket. You can't put, for example, a quad socket, which has 4 holes in it, 4 modules. You can't put a quad socket on the wall fed by one cable to think, yeah, I'll plug my Xbox One in there, I'll plug my smart TV there, my desktop there, and my PlayStation here. It doesn't work like that. Each module has to have its own cable, its own feed. So you can imagine now, in a house, you will soon start to run out of ports at the router. But what you'll normally find is, I've run cables all over my house, but you might only need to actually connect up 4 or 5 pieces of equipment. So although you might run 2 cables to each room, and if you've got, for example, like 10 rooms, that's going to be 20 cables. You don't need to connect them all up to here, because you might only actually need, you might run 2 cables to your daughter's bedroom, but right now she might not want any telephone line, or she might not have a smart TV. So you can just leave those cables there so they can be connected up in the future. So a lot of people get worried and they get confused, but really it's simple. So yes, if you're running a huge amount of cables, you can buy something like this, and then you will be able to wire up 24 cables onto this one patch panel. So that's why in an office you will often see loads of patch panels, because they're dealing with hundreds of cables. But in your home, you might like something like this. Ignore the fact that one's red and one's blue, they do exactly the same thing. But this is a little 12-port patch panel. You don't need any special rack like you would need for this. All you do is, it just unclips, and you would screw that into the wall, here or here, using these holes, or on here, and then you would run all your cables onto the back using the colour codes. Okay, and often when you look at colour codes, if you look closely now, you will see, if you look at this one here, can you zoom in on that? It will say 568A, let me get a screwdriver to show you, sorry, 568A and 568B, and the colour codes are different. You see the blues are the same and the browns are the same, but the orange and greens are different. Can you see that? Yeah? And now if we get a socket, to show you a socket, again you will see B this side and A that side. And again, you will see that the browns and the blues are the same, but the oranges and the greens are different. They're just two specifications. What I would advise is just go with the B. Just go with the B colour code. So for example, on the Bs, it will start on the oranges and then it will go down to the greens, while on the As, it starts on the greens. So just use the B colour code everywhere. So if you use the B colour code here, you have to use the B colour code here, because otherwise you're going to end up with a crossover cable. If you look at most patch leads now, it starts on the oranges, because they've been wired up to the B specification. So what I would suggest is just do B everywhere, but it doesn't really matter. If you do A on both sides, it's exactly the same thing, but don't do A and B or B and A. It has to be A and A or B and B to keep it all the same throughout. That's really the only confusing bit. So with something like this, it's quite nice. You would wire up, let's say if you wanted to run a double, I like personally running double sockets to each. I think you should really be running at least 2 outlets to each room, because then you've got the option of having phone in one and then data in the other. Or you might have a smart TV on one and you might have, for example, the Xbox or PlayStation in the other. So I think it's always worth running at least a double faceplate to each room. Yes, it means running more cables, but once you've got the route for the cables, there's no bother to put in 2 cables rather than just put in 1 cable. It's just a bit more expense on the cable itself. In my house, I've actually put quad plates everywhere, so I've got flexibility. If I wanted to run HDMI down it, then often HDMI takes 2 cables. Yes, you can now get it where it runs down 1 cable, but it's a lot more expensive. So for example, I could have the Xbox One, a smart TV, and then I could have a HDMI, signal going down it as well. So I just wanted the flexibility. So I've run quad plates everywhere. But obviously that decision's down to you. You need to have a think about, what you want to connect up. But if you go for something like this, it's quite a nice thing just for a home network. Now, I will show you this later in the video, but from memory, I don't sell these, but I think from memory they're about £20, £25, that sort of amount. What I like is, I quite like these quad plates, because again, in an office it would be a bit silly to have huge banks of these, because you would really just be wanting one of these. But in a house, you might only want 8 ports. Now if you want 8 ports, using something like that is overkill. You might as well just use 2 quad plates. They take up very little room, and 8 sockets, 8 points around the house might be enough for what you need. So you would put these next to your router, and then you would run, for example, let's say if you were just running 1 quad plate, you would put this next to your router, you would run 4 cables away from this, either to single sockets, so that would be 1, and then you would have another one go into that module, and then another one go into that module, and then you might have another single one in another room, okay? And then if you decided you wanted another 4 ports, you would get another quad plate and put it next to it. So as long as each module goes to each module on the other side, that's all you need to do. So that's what confuses people a lot, is when they see things like this. But you can simplify it a lot by just thinking about it's just going from socket to socket. The other thing you can't do, that some people think you can, is daisy chain. So for example, you cannot put a cable from here, which is next to your router, to this socket in your bedroom, and then take a cable out of here and go to another socket in the living room or the kitchen or another bedroom. Each outlet has to go all the way back to your router, yeah? You can't daisy chain it like you can do with telephone lines. They have to have their own individual cable feeding each outlet. So that's like the networking side of things to run the data signal around, so hopefully that's quite straightforward. Now, the good thing about it is you can also run your telephone line down these things as well. So let's say now we have our telephone socket near our patch panel here. Well, what you can do is you can plug in a quad adapter here, and then you can get yourself some, this is in the UK now, some BT to RJ45 leads, or in other parts of the world, if you're using RJ11, you would just be plugging, because these RJ45s will also accept an RJ11. Let me just get an RJ11 cable. There we go. Take the one out of the router. So with RJ11, they also fit in an RJ45. So in other parts of the world, when your telephone lines go down an RJ11, it's even easier for you guys because you can just run it straight from your telephone socket into your patch panel. So, but let's go back to the UK a minute. Pretend now we've got 4 BT to RJ45 leads, and then it comes out of your telephone line, and then it plugs into here. This then corresponds to, for example, this port here in the bedroom. You would then get a dongle like this, plug it in there, and then you can plug your phone directly in here. So now you're using the network wiring to push the phone signal down it. So for example, you can have up to 4 going into here, or what you can do is you could actually have a cable wired into your master socket, and you could wire it up to the back of this one here, or you can wire it up to one of your sockets in your quad plate here. And then what you can do is you could plug in an adapter like this, and then you see that will have 4 outlets, which is RJ45, and then you can plug in one of them, and you can say, okay, number 6 goes to the kitchen. I want the kitchen to be livened up. You plug that into number 6, and then pretend that this is your kitchen socket. Again, you get your adapter here, and you plug it in here, and then you've got your phone in there. Also then, you decide that you want one up in the bedroom. Well, you plug it into that adapter there, and you say that number 10 goes up to the bedroom, for example, and then that might come out on this one here, and again, you would have another one of these with another phone in the bedroom one. So that's the good thing about the phone side of things. Once you've got the network installed, you know, you can do that. Or you might have 2 telephone numbers, and then you can just do exactly the same thing with the next telephone number here, and you might say, yeah, I want it to go to number 12, for example, which goes to the office or the garage or wherever number 12 goes to. So it's just a way of doing it. I've already done a video on how to run phone lines down network wiring, so I'm not going to get into too much detail about it. Personally, I think the easiest way is to network up your house using, you know, a quad plate or one of these and sockets everywhere. And then I think the best way is to just get like a quad adapter like this, because then you don't have to get involved with running a separate telephone cable into your network, because it can look a bit messy and it might confuse people in the future. I think it's best just to have a quad adapter like this, and then you get your BT to RJ45 plug, and then that will liven up the wires coming out of here to the other rooms, and then you can just plug your dongles and your phones into the other rooms. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. I'm going to show you the setup now I have in my house, and I'm also going to go to another house that's using these quad adapters, and you'll get a better idea of how it looks in actual practice. But it kind of sounds confusing, but it's not. All you're doing is you're running a wire from A to B, or you running 10 wires from A to B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way around the house. So that's all you're doing, is just spreading out like a star wiring network from the router, spreading out to the rest of the house. Hi, so I'm at my friend's house at the moment, and this is a real life working example of what I was explaining earlier on the table. So here we have the BT master socket with the VDSL faceplates. This is a Mark II one. You can, the most recent one at the time of making this video is a Mark III. And then what you have is an RJ45 to RJ11 lead, which feeds the router. You might have an RJ11 to RJ11, but this top socket here fits an RJ11 and an RJ45. So it's a nice Cat6 lead, RJ45 to RJ11, which goes into, this is a TalkTalk router, and it goes into the RJ11 port at the back there. And as you can see on this router, there's 4 Ethernet ports. So in this house at the moment, they're only actually using 3 of them, so they've got 1 spare. If all 4 were being used, or if you wanted to have 5 or 6 pieces of equipment or more connected, you would then need to get a network switch. I have done a video on the network switch, quite a cheap item, between £20 and £30, depending if you want a fast Ethernet or a gigabit one. But they're not a lot of money. They're really easy to do. All you need to do is plug in another Ethernet cable from here into your switch, and then that will free up. The switch then will have another 4 ports, or it could have 8 ports depending on what switch you get, or it can be or it can be a bigger switch as well. So yeah, if you have a look, this is all the Cat 5e cabling that goes all the way around the house, and the Cat 5e is the grey stuff. This is some old alarm cable here, but this is Cat 5e, and it goes into these quad plates here. So if you have a look, they're really nice, these quad plates. They're only one gang size, but yet there's 4 RJ45 ports on them. Yeah, and they don't take up a lot of room. So rather than using a patch panel, if you've only got, for example, here now, they've wired up the house with 18. You can see that down there. 18 ports. So there's 18 around the house, which is ample for most houses. Obviously, the bigger houses might want more, or depends on your needs. But a lot of houses, you might just get away with 2 of these. So rather than going down the route of installing a patch panel, this takes up very little room. You know, it's just the size of 2 telephone sockets, and they're ideal. You do need your back box does need to be. I haven't got a ruler with me, but you do need a slightly bigger back box because to terminate 4 cables is quite hard in such a small space. So just bear that in mind. But if you have a look here, for example, number 7 there, I know that goes over to the computer. So in this house, they've done double faceplates everywhere, double module faceplates, 1 gang. If you have a look there, you see, nice chrome one. So it's a nice job, and that's number 7. So now if you wanted to, for example, install another port, if you wanted to liven up another port, all you would have to do is, you would need 2 Ethernet cables, 1 to attach your equipment, and 1 to go from your router or your switch to the quad plate. So in this example here, if we want to connect up this one here, which is number 5, pretend you want to use this for your laptop or your smart TV or whatever you want to use it for. Okay, so that's your lead plugged in there. And to liven up the other side, you first of all need to find where number 5 is, which is up here. And then I'm going to put the camera down a minute while I plug it in, and then I'll show you. I'll route it. It can be routed another time, but I'll tell you what, we'll just do it now. Okay, so all you do is you plug your Ethernet cable. Again, this is all Cat 5e here. Up through there. Let me get the camera back there. So I've plugged it into number 5 there. It goes up through the hole. And now we've got a spare port. Sorry, I'm doing this one-handed, so it's hard. We've got a spare port here. There we go. And now that will be it. That socket over there will be livened up for wired Ethernet. So it's perfect if you've got your smart TV or your Xbox One, your PlayStation, whatever you're wanting to network, you haven't got to rely on the wireless signal. So once you do, it is a bit of a pain installing all these wires to begin with, but if you're doing any renovation work, it is worth it, because once it's set up, it's so easy and so flexible just to play around with it. And then, for example, if you wanted to have a phone in a separate room, okay, here they have got a separate system for the phone, it's all wired up separately, but it's so easy to do, because all you would do is you could get your BT plug to RJ45 lead and plug it into number 3, and then that will liven up wherever number 3 comes up in the house. You just then get a dongle the other side, but I will do a video, you'll see it on my setup at home. It will be an RJ45 to BT dongle, and then you plug your phone in there and you can distribute all your phone signal all around the network wiring as well. So it's a good job, and I just wanted to show you this because it makes a lot more sense when you actually see it set up like this in the real world, rather than explaining it on the on the bench. Okay. Right, just as an afterthought, I thought I'd better show you the inside of the socket just so you can see how it's wired up. So, and also the back box, I wasn't sure about the width of it, but it is actually 32 mil, which is 1.25 inches. So that would be, I would say, at the minimum. You could always go deeper, the more room the better. But if you have a look here, you can see it is quite tight. You see it's all labelled up. 1, 3, 2 there, and 4 in the bottom corner. So I've got the shakes. There you go. If you have a look there, you can see it all. So these are nice faceplates. These ones. These are actually made by Molex. They're expensive. This particular this particular brand, but they are quality. So you can have a look at all the terminations there. Yeah. Okay. And I'll just show you the back of the double sockets as well. This was the double socket I showed you earlier. So as you can see here, what they've done is, there's plenty of slack here because this, under the parquet floor in here, it's normal floorboards. So there's a bit of conduit going right down, and so you can lose your slack in there. Because sometimes it's very hard to work if you've just got a tiny bit of wire sticking up. It's hard to get access. Sometimes it can be even hard to undo the sockets, because remember, as long as you only strip back a small amount, you can have plenty of slack. You can have plenty of slack under the floorboards, that's not a problem. It's just, obviously, don't cut the wire, the sheath back here, and have loads of wires showing. But you'll have to watch one of my other videos on how to wire up Cat 5e sockets. But this is a mistake a lot of people make as well. They think that a double faceplate like this can be fed from one cable, because they're thinking it's similar to telephone wiring, but it's not. Every network point has to have its own wire going back to the router or back to your network switch. So as you can see here, there's two modules and there's 2 cables feeding it. And I've just popped off, it has the little protective cover on it here. So I've just popped that off just to show you the terminations there. And this is wired up using the B configuration, because it starts with the oranges. Yeah, so out of the 2 configurations, A and B, this house has been wired up using the B. Yeah, that's it. So I'll just show you that there, just to clear up. Thought you might like to see the back of the socket. It's a really nice job here, actually. It's well done. Okay.